If you have a normal sleep schedule and you've not had time to watch the Manila Major, let me fill you in. In the upper bracket, we had Team Liquid versus Team Phoenix. Phoenix ran over Liquid, which was incredibly surprising in both games, mostly due to their great out-execution and their patented super aggro style. First game, Ricky really fucked up Team Liquid's lanes, and they never really recovered. Matumbo Man and Mind Control both had surprisingly poor games. Mind Control tended not to come to fights when he should have been, and it just really screwed them over. In Game 2, they started out really well. They had 2 racks, and then they had one failed high ground push where they lost a bunch of heroes, and they were really never able to recover at that point. They failed their high ground push with the Aegis, and because they had built for such an aggressive early game, Matumbo Man had no farm and eventually ended up just doing nothing. Again, this is the second game in a row that Matumbo Man was incredibly underwhelming. In this case, however, it was mostly due to their specific strategy, and they just missed their timing. MVP did a phenomenal job of not panicking with 2 racks down and being able to pull themselves back out of that dip. Moving on to the next game, this was again a best of 3. The vast majority of this game comes down to the fact that Navi and OG play incredibly similar playstyles. They're both very reliant on their incredibly talented mid players, and unfortunately, OG simply executed their strategies better and were able to pick up their slacks in their other cores in a much more significant manner. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the first game was that there was a very clear indication of the two teams' positions on the 4 role. Navi chooses to get aggressive with art style and Suniko moving around more aggressively, while on the other hand, Fly plays incredibly passively in the safe lane in almost every game, and Crit spends almost 100% of his time sitting behind Miracle, ensuring that he has a good start. Magnus was able to secure an early Blink Dagger. I think in the end, this game was far too much on Dendi, and he just did not perform to the level that he needed. With Magnus and the 2 melee cores, they were really able to secure their farm. It is important to note here that OG also displayed an incredible amount of discipline with respect to pushing up high ground and not overforcing their hand after they win a team fight. The rest of the games today are going to be best of 1s. In the lower bracket, the losing team is eliminated. First one up was Complexity versus Wings. Everyone was really hyped on Wings coming into this tournament, and unfortunately they did not deliver in this best of 1. They picked a draft that was way too cheesy and ultimately got punished for it by the much more stable lineup of Complexity. We saw the return of Complexity's patented incredible team fighting execution, both by individual players and through a teamwork. This game was mostly lost on the fact that initiated team fights when they weren't particularly in advantageous situations. Mineski versus Alliance, it was clear that Mineski was getting a lot of support from home. They ended up making a lot of patented Mineski mistakes in regards to over-aggression and poor decision-making in the late stages of the game. Alliance ran some very strange lanes, and in the early game, Mineski looked very good. They had played their patented aggressive style that they share with MVP. However, in contrast, overextended significantly too many times, and ended up being punished by the much more stable and experienced Alliance, where they simply played their game, they waited for Mineski to make a mistake, and they pounced on the opportunities that they had. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this because it's a big result, EG losing to VGR and getting eliminated in the first day of main stage play. VGR picked the most meta heroes ever, tri-core lineup, and they just played very stable Dota. We saw a couple of things that were very interesting. One is that it is important to note that there seems to be a lack of communication between the EG players. This might simply be due to Fear, PPD, and Universe had all played together for a significant amount of time, which would have led to a very good level of chemistry that is very hard to recreate in such a short period of time relative. It should be noted that EG has played very few games in this patch. The draft was surprisingly weak. They had no answer to the triple tanky cores, but they did have a very potentially good timing. And early, EG capitalized, winning all of their lanes as they usually do, outplaying their opponents. However, they had no way to push high ground at the early enough stage where VGR's lineup was unable to come back into the game. Ultimately, this was their downfall. There were a few big issues that are going to be pertinent going forward for EG, mainly due to Sumail's hero pool. He is a mid-lane winner. Much like how Miracle plays, he dominates his lane, he's incredibly talented. Unfortunately, the vast majority of his heroes are playmaking heroes, which are out of meta right now. All the heroes that are played are these passive farming, tanky, team-fighting mids, and that's not where he excels. And additionally, it should be noted that Aoi is still having a difficult time transitioning from support back to carry, and we've seen his mechanics of farming and moving around the map to maximize efficiency have been very good. He has had, similar to how Black has trouble, where he is not able to transition between fighting and farming nearly as effectively as someone like Arteezy is. The last game of the day was Secret versus Team Empire. Another big surprising result with Empire winning. Secret played much too greedy of a draft, and they had 0 aggressive heroes in the early game, and Empire did a very good job of punishing that very poor draft decision. With Ricky instilling fear with invisible lifestealer bombs once he hit 6, and with Sand King doing a tremendous amount of damage with fantastic epicenters and great initiations with Burrow Strike, they were just unable to get to a point where they could stabilize and then push back from the extreme aggression that came out from Team Empire. Again, we saw the issue that we had seen in a couple of previous Secret games where Arteezy and Eternal Envy both struggle with sharing their farming patterns, as they both like to vacuum up all the farm. This was highlighted by the fact that their draft was very gold and experience intensive. It ultimately left them in a point where they had to make very poor fight decisions and were punished for it. Keynotes from the day: controlled aggression and mid-game teamfights are incredibly important. With MVP, complexity, and even alliance in the later stages of the game, we saw some fantastic teamfights that really allowed these teams to take over the game in a way that was non-dependent on winning their lanes, but instead on execution and teamwork. With the exception of alliance, we saw a lot of these slower teams get punished due to this mid-game centric teamfight. As expected, with the focus on strength cores and roaming supports, the early game is very important. Even more so is securing your mid-game. Teams that are much more reliant on the 30+ minute mark were punished very hard. The teams that were most successful have very good space creators, whether it be in the 3 or 4 position. Teams required that one hero to start a fight and allow their more farmed cores and big teamfight abilities to follow up very quickly, whether it be a Blink Slardar or Earth Spirit rolling in on his rocks. Lastly, I would like to celebrate the fact that there were no cheese strats that won any games today. We saw Wings try a cheese strat with pooling the Tiny and Aghanims, but it didn't end up working. It makes me happy to know that the team that played the best in that particular game won. Not because of a ridiculous draft that no one saw coming, which is impressive in its own right, but instead due to great execution and good team. With both Secret and EG out in the first day, we have some very exciting matchups. Liquid knocked down to the lower bracket. We're going to have new teams that are going to be able to either re-emerge as champions in the case of Alliance and Na'Vi, or young teams that are able to establish themselves as top tier with new Empire, new Vici, Complexity, all being able to manage to win their games in fairly significant fashion.
And now the somebody say, could you pick it up far? But and I and see, but I don't. That's so cool. How do you do that? I'm geeking out right now. I could pick it up, pick it